The Shadow Beneath the Mountain. Part I. The Awakening. The town of Darswell lay cradled in a narrow valley, where the mountains leaned inward as if conspiring to keep secrets. By day, the place looked unremarkable, a cluster of houses, a train station that had not seen a train in years, and a main street lined with shops that rarely had customers. By night, however, the town was cloaked in an unnatural silence, the kind that seemed less like peace and more like anticipation. On one such night, when the air pressed heavy with the promise of rain, Yarina Merk woke abruptly. She did not remember falling asleep, only the sensation of being submerged in a dream too deep to surface from. Something had pulled her awake. At first she thought it was a noise, a whisper, thin and brittle like paper tearing. She sat up in bed, heart knocking against her ribs, and listened. The whisper didn't come again, yet the air in the room felt wrong, like it was slightly heavier than it should be. The window was closed, but the curtains swayed as if someone had exhaled against them. Her eyes adjusted to the dark. Nothing was there. Just the crooked dresser, the chair with a sweater draped over it, the faint shape of the mountain ridge beyond the glass. But still she felt watched. She lived alone, ever since she'd come back to Darswell after her mother's passing. The house was old, wooden, full of sounds that didn't belong to the present day, creaks in the floor, sighs in the walls. But this was different, she whispered to herself, it's just the wind. But she didn't believe it. The following morning, the sense of unease clung to her. The sky was dull silver, clouds packed so tightly that no sunlight seeped through. Yarina wrapped a scarf around her neck and walked down the sloping road into town. People here did not speak loudly. They greeted each other with nods, with faint smiles, as though saving their voices for something more important. She passed the bakery, the post office, the boarded-up cinema. Everything felt paused, waiting. At the end of the street stood the library, or what passed for one. Half the shelves were empty, and the other half contained books no one borrowed. Yarina had taken a job there when she returned, though it was less about working and more about existing somewhere among people. Her colleague Tomas was already there, an elderly man with sharp eyes and a memory for every book the library had ever owned. He nodded at her. You look pale, he said. Didn't sleep well, she admitted. Dreams. I don't know, not dreams exactly, more like someone calling. Tomas raised an eyebrow but said nothing, only returned to his task of repairing a frayed book spine. He was not the kind of man who pressed for details. Still, his silence seemed to confirm something. That afternoon, a storm broke. Rain lashed against the windows in relentless sheets. The library emptied, leaving Yarina and Tomas alone among the shelves. At some point the lights flickered, then steadied. It was then she heard it again. A whisper, not loud but unmistakable. It seemed to come from between the books. She turned, expecting to see someone there, but found only empty air. Her throat tightened. Did you hear that? She asked Tomas. He did not look up from his work. Hear what? The voice. He paused for a long moment, then closed the book in his hands. Slowly, he lifted his gaze to her. You should not answer if it speaks again. Yarina blinked. What do you mean? You heard it. But Tomas didn't reply. He simply got up, fetched his coat, and said, Storm's bad, close up early. Then he left, leaving her alone with the whispering shelves. That night the dreams returned. She stood on the mountain slope. The ground beneath her feet pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat. A cave mouth yawned open ahead, blacker than shadow, and from it came the whisper, clear now, carrying her name, Yarina. The sound was both inside her skull and echoing through the night. It drew her forward. She wanted to resist, but her body moved as if pulled by threads. She stepped into the cave. Inside, the air was cold enough to bite. Her breath smoked. The tunnel sloped downward, narrowing until she could barely fit, and then sudden vastness. A chamber stretched out before her, larger than any cathedral. Its walls glistened with something not rock, not ice, not metal, but something alive. Shapes stirred within them like figures trapped in amber. Some looked almost human. At the center of the chamber stood a stone altar, and on it, a book. Its pages turned despite the still air, as though invisible hands rifled through them. The whisper became a chorus now, countless voices speaking at once, rising, overlapping. We remember you. We remember. Yarina reached out. Her fingers brushed the cover. She woke screaming. Her heart hammered so violently that she feared it might tear itself apart. The room was dark, the storm gone, replaced by the silence of 3 a.m. She pressed her palms against her face, trying to breathe. But when she lowered her hands, she saw it. On her desk beside the lamp lay a book. It had not been there when she went to bed. The same book from the dream. Its cover was black, unmarked. No title, no author. But as she stared at it, the faintest whisper stirred again, crawling along the edges of her hearing. Open. Her hand shook as she reached out. And froze when a knock came at the door. 3 sharp raps. At 3 a.m. her breath caught. Nobody ever visited her this late. Nobody should even be awake. The knock came again. Yarina, a voice called softly. She recognized it, her mother's voice, but her mother had been dead for over a year. Part II. The knock. Yarina stood frozen in her bedroom, staring at the door as though it might breathe. The book still lay on her desk, silent and heavy, yet its presence pressed against her mind like a hand on the back of her skull. The knock came a third time, slow, deliberate. Yarina. Her mother's voice again. Every instinct screamed that opening the door would be a mistake, yet her body wavered toward it, as if the voice had hooked itself into her bones. She reached for the handle, her fingertips brushing the cold metal. At the last moment she jerked back. "No," she whispered. Silence. The air in the room grew dense, pressing against her chest. Then so sudden it made her flinch, the book on the desk shuddered. A low thrum pulsed from it like a heartbeat. The whisper followed, not her mother this time. Deeper, layered, countless voices. Open. Yarina stumbled backward, nearly tripping over the chair. She pressed her hands against her ears, but the whisper seeped through, vibrating inside her skull. And then, abruptly, it stopped. The room was still. The door was silent. The book lay motionless. Only her ragged breathing filled the air. The next morning, Yarina told herself it had been a dream within a dream. Exhaustion, stress, the storm. Anything but what it felt like. But when she looked at her desk, the book was still there. She didn't touch it, didn't dare. She left the house without breakfast and went straight to the library. Tomas was waiting, standing at the entrance as though he had expected her. His face, usually calm, was taut with something she hadn't seen before: fear. "You saw it," he said, not as a question. Her stomach lurched. "What?" "The book." Her throat went dry. "How do you know?" "Oh." He glanced around to make sure no one was near, then lowered his voice. "Because it doesn't choose many, and once it chooses, it doesn't leave." Yarina stared at him. The words sounded absurd, and yet they resonated with the heavy dread in her chest. "What is it?" Tomas hesitated, then gestured for her to follow him into the back room. It was cramped, filled with boxes of unsorted donations and broken furniture. He shut the door behind them. "There are stories," he said, "older than this town, before the mines, before the railway, before people lived here at all. Stories of the mountain. They say there's something beneath it, not stone, not earth, something that remembers." Her skin prickled. Remembers what? Names, faces, the ones who listened when it called. Yarina shook her head. "No, that's just folklore." "Oh." But Tomas's eyes pinned her in place. "Did it speak to you?" She couldn't answer. Her silence was enough. He exhaled heavily. "Then you're already marked." That night, Yarina dreamed again. This time she was back in the cavern, but it was different, darker, narrower, the walls closer, as if the place itself were tightening around her. The shapes inside the walls stirred more violently. She saw hands pressing outward, mouths moving soundlessly, eyes flicking open. The altar was there, the book upon it. Its pages turned faster now, the sound like wings beating. Yarina. This time it was her mother's voice. It came not from beyond the chamber, but from inside the book itself. "I'm waiting for you. I'm so cold. Help me." Tears stung Yarina's eyes in the dream. She reached for the book and woke to find her hand outstretched in the dark, her fingers grazing the real book on her desk. She recoiled, scrambling back, her breath sharp. The book was open. She hadn't opened it. The page before her bore no words, only a single faint handprint, as though pressed into the paper from the inside. It was small, unmistakably feminine, her mother's. The following days blurred. Yarina tried to carry on at the library, but her thoughts returned constantly to the book. It sat on her desk like an anchor, pulling at her even when she wasn't home. The whispers came and went, sometimes faint, sometimes sharp enough to make her gasp aloud in public. Tomas noticed. "You're unraveling," he told her. "Then tell me what it wants," she snapped, but he only shook his head. "What it wants is what it always wanted, to be remembered, to be fed." Fed. He didn't answer. On the fourth night, Yarina broke. She sat before the book, staring at its black cover. Her hands shook, but she opened it. The pages writhed beneath her fingers, words bleeding across them in ink that shifted like smoke. She read, though the language was not one she knew. Still, she understood. Images bloomed in her mind, of rituals performed beneath the mountain, of offerings made, of people stepping willingly into the cavern and never returning. At the end of the passage, a phrase burned clear in her head: "The mountain does not forget. The mountain does not forgive." She slammed the book shut, her stomach twisting. The knock came again, 3 raps. "Yarina," her mother's voice whispered, closer this time, almost inside the room. Something inside her broke open. Rage, grief, longing, all tangled. She wrenched the door wide. The hallway was empty, but the floorboards were wet, as if someone had walked there barefoot, leaving a trail of damp footprints leading away. The next morning, Yarina followed those footprints in her mind, tracing them through the streets of Darswell. They led, inevitably, toward the base of the mountain. By the time she realized where her feet had taken her, she was already there. The slope rose before her, green and gray, scarred with the remnants of old mining tunnels. One of those tunnels, half hidden by brush, yawned open like the mouth of something sleeping. The whisper rose in her ears. Come. She stood trembling, torn between flight and surrender. Then she heard another voice, real, human. Don't go in. She turned. Tomas stood a few yards away, his expression grim. You can't stop it once you start, he said. The book isn't a door, it's a promise, and the mountain always collects. Yarina's voice shook. Then what am I supposed to do? His gaze flicked past her to the tunnel mouth. Choose. Enter and learn what waits, or resist and let it come to you. But either way, it will not let you go. The wind hissed through the trees, carrying the whisper louder now, almost jubilant. We remember you, we remember. And Yarina realized the choice was no choice at all. She stepped toward the darkness. Part I. The descent extended. The tunnel swallowed Yarina whole. Her flashlight beam shook in her trembling hands, painting fractured shapes along the slick walls. Drops of water plinked steadily from the ceiling, echoing too loudly, like the tunnel itself was amplifying even the smallest sound. The air smelled of stone, mold, and something sharper, like rust or blood. Behind her, Tomas followed silently. His footsteps were deliberate, patient, the gait of a man who had done this before. Yarina wanted to ask him how many times he had walked this path, how many had gone in with him and never returned. But the words sat heavy on her tongue. To speak them aloud would make them real. Why didn't you stop me? She asked finally, her voice small in the oppressive dark. Tomas didn't answer right away. His lantern cast his shadow tall and gaunt against the walls. Because I knew you wouldn't turn back. People never do once it calls them. People, she whispered, so there were others. Always, Tomas said, the mountain feeds on memory. And Darswell has always been a generous town. The words lodged inside her like a shard of glass. She turned away, kept walking. The tunnel sloped downward, tighter and tighter. Soon it no longer resembled stone at all. The walls curved inward like ribs, glistened as though they were slick with sweat. The beam of her flashlight caught impressions in the surface, faces pressed against the walls, frozen mid-scream. For a heartbeat, she swore one of them blinked. Her breath caught. They're alive. No, Tomas said softly. Not alive, not dead either. They are remembered. The words sank into her stomach like lead. The tunnel widened abruptly into the chamber from her dreams. Yarina had thought she was prepared for it, but the reality stole the breath from her lungs. The cavern was vast beyond comprehension, stretching farther than her light could reach. Veins of dim, pulsing light ran through the walls like blood vessels. The air itself vibrated, carrying the faint hum of countless whispers layered atop one another. And the faces, God, the faces. They writhed beneath the surface of the walls, thousands of them, shifting, twisting, mouths opening in silent cries. Their eyes rolled back and forth, some wet with tears that seeped into the stone. The sight was so overwhelming that Yarina dropped her flashlight. It clattered against the stone floor and spun wildly before coming to rest. Her knees buckled. This is impossible. Tomas's face was pale but steady. It is older than impossible. That is why we fear it. At the chamber's center rose the altar, and upon it the book. Its cover was black and slick, as though wet. Pages flipped themselves with no wind, each turn accompanied by a sound too organic to be paper. Yarina felt it in her chest, a deep thrumming, like a second heart beating in tandem with her own. Her gaze fell to the altar base. Carved spirals spiraled inward, forming rows of names etched in symbols she had never studied, yet could read with horrifying clarity. Dozens of surnames. She recognized them, Darswell names, whispered in half-remembered cautionary tales. People who had vanished into thin air, their disappearances dismissed as accidents, tragedies, mysteries. And there, glowing faintly at the end of the row, Merk, her family's, her blood, her— No, Yarina whispered, shaking her head violently. No, no, no. The whispers surged like a tide, pressing into her skull. You are ours, you always were. We do not forget, we do not forgive. The shadows stirred at the far end of the cavern, something uncoiled from the darkness, immense and shapeless. It was not a creature, not in any form the human mind was meant to hold. It was shadow and flesh and memory fused, a writhing mass of half-formed faces and limbs that bloomed and dissolved like smoke. Dozens of eyes opened across its surface, all fixed on her. Among them was her mother's face. Yarina, it mouthed. The voice wasn't whispering now. It was clear, tender, heartbreakingly familiar. I'm waiting, please help me. Yarina's chest seized. Tears blurred her vision. She staggered toward it, reaching out. Tomas grabbed her arm. It is not her. She tried to wrench free, her voice breaking, but it looks like her. That's what it wants. It wears the voices of those we've lost. It knows your grief. That is how it binds you. But she couldn't stop. The longing was unbearable. To hear her mother's voice again, to hold her, to undo the loneliness that had devoured her for a year, it was worth anything. Wasn't it? The shadow loomed closer, its many faces writhing in grotesque imitation of comfort. One with us forever remembered, forever bound. Yarina's trembling hands hovered above the altar. The book pulsed beneath them like living flesh. Her mother's face stretched toward her from the shadow mass. Open it, it begged. And we'll be together again. Her mind split in two. One part screamed to resist, the other to surrender. She had never felt so small, so lost. Then Tomas's earlier words struck her like lightning. The book isn't a door, it's a promise. If she opened it, she wouldn't be freeing her mother. She would be signing her own name into eternity, binding herself to the mountain forever. Yarina's hands shook violently. She turned to Tomas, desperate. If I don't open it, what happens? His gaze was heavy. Then it will chase you, all your life. It will whisper in your blood, you will never be free. Her voice broke, and if I do. He didn't answer. His silence was worse than truth. The whispers clawed at her. The cavern inhaled. The walls pressed forward, the faces inside them straining. With a scream of rage and grief, Yarina seized the book in both hands. The shadows shrieked in triumph. But instead of opening it, she lifted it high and brought it crashing down against the altar. The chamber convulsed. The walls erupted with 1,000 voices shrieking in agony. The altar cracked, a jagged fissure racing across its surface. The book writhed in her grip, fighting to escape, its pages whipping wildly. She slammed it down again and again. On the third strike, light erupted from within the book, blinding, searing, a sun exploding underground. The whispers became screams. When her vision returned, Yarina lay on the cavern floor, lungs heaving. Ash drifted in the air, black and fine, settling like snow. The book was gone. Nothing remained but a smear of soot on the cracked altar. The cavern was silent. The faces in the walls had stilled, eyes closed as if finally sleeping. The shadow mass had recoiled into the depths, leaving only darkness. Beside her, Tomas stood trembling, lantern shaking in his hand. No one's ever done that, he whispered. No one's ever broken the book. Yarina staggered to her feet, her body screaming with exhaustion. Then it's over. Tomas's eyes were full of sorrow. The vessel is gone. But the mountain itself cannot be broken. You heard it, but you didn't kill it. Nothing can. Her chest tightened with dread. Then what happens to me? You wounded it, Tomas said softly. So now it will never stop remembering you. They left the chamber as dawn touched the horizon. The mountain loomed behind them, silent, its slopes painted in the first light of morning. For the first time, Yarina thought it looked less like stone and more like something vast lying in wait, its bulk barely concealed beneath the earth. For a fleeting moment, she dared to hope she had won. But that night, lying in her bed, she awoke to silence too deep to be natural. Her heart hammered as she listened, and then she heard it, not a chorus of countless voices, not her mother's gentle plea. Just a single word, low and patient, curling through the dark like smoke. Waiting. Epilogue. Months passed. Darswell moved on, as it always did. The mountain loomed, unchanging, unbroken. People still disappeared sometimes, whispered about in hushed voices, but Yarina lived on. She kept working at the library. She forced herself to laugh at small things. She buried her grief deep where the whispers couldn't reach. Or so she thought, because sometimes when she looked too long at the mountain, the ground seemed to thrum beneath her feet like a giant heartbeat, and in the corners of mirrors she sometimes glimpsed faces not her own, watching, waiting. The book was gone, but the mountain never forgets, and it never forgives. Part IV, The Long Echo. For weeks, Darswell pretended nothing had changed. The townsfolk went about their routines, with the same cautious quiet as always. The bakery opened at dawn, its windows fogged with steam. The post office kept its erratic hours. The cinema stage shuttered. The mountain loomed, as it had for centuries, unmoved and unmoving. But Yarina felt the difference. At first, it was subtle. She would wake at night and listen to the silence pressing against the walls of her house, thick and expectant. Or she would pass townspeople on the street and notice the way their eyes lingered on her a fraction too long, as if they could sense what she had done. Tomas still came to the library. He never spoke of the cavern, never mentioned the book, but sometimes she caught him watching her with an expression she couldn't decipher. Pity, perhaps, or fear. She wanted to believe the nightmare was over. That by destroying the book, she had broken the mountain's grasp. But deep down she knew the truth. She hadn't ended anything. She had only scarred it, and scars always ache, given time. The first sign came a month later. She was shelving a stack of battered novels when her hand froze midair. A whisper, faint and brittle, curled through the stacks. Yarina, her heart lurched. She spun, but the library was empty, just rows of dusty shelves and the smell of paper. It took her 5 minutes to gather the courage to finish her work. The second sign came 3 nights later. She woke to find herself standing in the kitchen, with no memory of leaving her bed. The back door was ajar, moonlight spilling through it, and outside, pressed into the dirt of the yard, were barefoot footprints, leading toward the mountain. They were her size. Yarina tried to confide in Tomas, but he only shook his head. "It has your name now," he said quietly. "The book may be gone, but memory cannot be burned. It will draw you back one way or another." Her voice cracked. "Then what am I supposed to do? Run?" "Oh, you can't outrun something that lives beneath your feet." He didn't have to explain further. She already knew. The dreams returned. She walked endless tunnels, each one splitting into 100 more, until the mountain was a labyrinth of bone and shadow. She heard voices calling from every direction, some strangers, some people she had known, and always her mother, begging her to follow. Sometimes she glimpsed Tomas in those dreams, standing at the end of a tunnel with his lantern raised, his face blank and eyeless. Other times she saw herself reflected in the slick walls, but older, hollow-cheeked, her lips moving in whispers she couldn't hear. Every morning she woke exhausted, her sheets damp with sweat, the taste of stone dust on her tongue. The town began to change too. A child went missing from the schoolyard. A miner's dog vanished, though its collar was later found on the mountain slope. Old Mrs. Corin, who lived near the forest edge, stopped coming into town. When her niece went to check on her, the house was empty, fire still burning in the stove, rocking chair swaying. People didn't talk about it directly, but Yarina felt the silence tighten. Darswell had always lived in the shadow of disappearances, but now the rhythm had quickened, as if the mountain were growing hungrier. She wondered if it was her fault, if by breaking the book she had awakened something deeper, something less restrained. One night the knock came again, 3 sharp raps against her front door. Her body froze. She had prayed never to hear it again, but there it was, echoing through the house at 3 a.m. "Yarina," her mother's voice whispered, just as it had that first night. Her hands trembled violently. She did not move, did not breathe. The voice grew sharper. "Yarina, don't keep me waiting." Oh. The walls seemed to lean inward, the air thickening. Then slowly the door handle turned. She lunged forward, shoving a chair under it before it could swing open. For long minutes the handle rattled, pressed by invisible hands. Finally it stilled, but the footprints were there in the morning, damp, black with soil, leading away toward the mountain. Tomas came to her house the next day. She showed him the prints, her voice trembling with panic. "It's stronger now," he admitted grimly. "The mountain doesn't take humiliation lightly. You broke its vessel. Now it wants to make you the next one." "What do I do?" she begged. He was silent for a long time. Then he said there might be a way, not to stop it, but to pass it on. Her stomach lurched. "What do you mean?" "There are always names," Tomas said. "Always choices. Someone must carry the memory." "If not you," he trailed off, but the meaning was clear. Her blood ran cold. "You're telling me to sacrifice someone else." "I'm telling you the mountain does not forget," he said quietly. "But perhaps it can be convinced to remember another more strongly." She stared at him in horror. "And how do you know that?" His gaze did not waver. "Because I've done it." The world tilted beneath her. She understood then why Tomas always looked so tired, why his eyes carried so much weight. He wasn't just a witness. He was complicit, and now he was asking her to become the same. That night she sat awake at her desk, staring at her reflection in the darkened window. The mountain loomed outside, its silhouette blotting out the stars. The whisper was constant now, a steady pulse beneath her thoughts. "We are waiting." "We remember," she thought of her mother. She thought of Tomas, of the town, of all the names carved into the altar's base, of the child who had gone missing, of the old woman's empty chair rocking by the fire. The mountain had always been fed, always. Whether willingly or not, maybe Tomas was right. Maybe the only choice left was who would be next. The thought hollowed her. She pressed her hands to her ears, but the whisper only grew louder. At dawn, she walked out to the base of the mountain. The air was sharp with frost, her breath a pale fog. The tunnel mouth yawned dark before her, waiting. She did not go inside, not yet. She stood there for a long time, her heart pounding, until she realized she was no longer alone. Children had gathered at the tree line, watching her silently. 3 of them, faces pale, eyes too wide. They said nothing. When she met their gaze, they turned and ran back into the forest. The message was clear. The mountain wasn't waiting for her to choose. It was choosing for her. That night, Yarina lit every lamp in her house. She sat awake with a knife clutched in her hand, though she knew it was useless against what waited in the dark. Still, it made her feel less helpless. At 3 a.m., the whisper came again, but this time it wasn't just her mother's voice. It was dozens layered together, men, women, children, all of them speaking her name in perfect unison, Yarina. The sound shook the house. The windows rattled. The walls bowed inward as if the mountain itself were bending closer. She covered her ears and screamed. The voices only laughed. By morning she was gone. Her house stood empty, the lamps still burning. The knife lay on the floor, its blade clean. The door was ajar, footprints in the dirt outside leading toward the mountain. In the library, Tomas sat alone at the desk. He opened a ledger, dipped a pen, and wrote a single word on the last line of a long, unbroken list. Mirk. Then he closed the book and whispered,